We have a leaky valve cover gasket on this 2.0T Audi engine. It's going to be the same thing for the 2.0T engine on Volkswagens as well. It's a pretty simple job to do and it's not that bad. There's a few things we need to pull off. Just pull off the graphics and some of the plastic trim pieces. Pull out all 4 coil packs and the wiring harness, just set it to the side. Take out each one of the screws holding the valve cover in place. The valve cover bolts are a T30 Torx. The bolts that hold this PCV system on are a T25, and most of them are easy to get to except for the one down in here. It's a bit tricky. I had to use this thin, long T25 to get down into the one bolt that's a little bit harder to get to. I wasn't able to use just a standard extension in T25 Torx because it was just a bit too big. Disconnecting some of the other PCV hoses, these are really easy. You just squeeze both sides and it comes off. Now we can feel the whole thing move. It's still held on by 2 rubber hoses here, so I'm gonna carefully try to work those off when I have the whole thing free. There's 2 bolts on the top of the timing cover that are also holding the valve cover in. Sometimes the rubber hoses can be really stuck on there with some of the oil and grease, so using a pick to loosen that up should make it a bit easier to work that off. All right, and the valve cover's free. By feeling it, especially in the areas where it's a bit more warm, this is really quite brittle. On the outside, it's very rubbery, but definitely more brittle, especially in the areas with more heat. I was trying to carefully take this off, but even right here, it's just so brittle that it broke. It's always a good idea to visually check and make sure you have the same gasket. We'll remove the old gasket. I'll try to do it carefully, not to scratch anything or break any of the plastic. Wow, that's brittle. I can hear it cracking. That is very brittle. These pieces here, which are the most brittle, the whole thing's breaking apart. A gasket this brittle is definitely not gonna seal, and if it does, it's not gonna do it very well or for very long. We'll open up the new one. Now with the new one, there is a huge difference in just the flexibility of this. This is what the gasket is supposed to feel like. With a rag, we'll clean everything up, and I'll also make sure to get out all the little pieces, the little fragment right there. We'll put our new gasket in, and man, this feels so much nicer. Just keep the orientation the same. This little tab I know is on this side. Everything has a little ridge that it presses into and make sure all that seats where it's supposed to go. Looks like everything is in great shape under here. Nothing looks excessively worn. And where we've been seeing the oil is in a few of these spark plug holes. There'll be oil on the inside, and then right below everything. We'll get the mating surface all cleaned up. We'll reinstall the valve cover. We'll reinstall the tubes. By hand, we'll get a few of them started. Reinstall the clamp for the next hose. Tighten the clamps. We'll pop this one back on. Just be careful with this one in particular because it likes to be brittle. Tighten the bolts starting from the inside and working your way out. So you're starting from the middle and switching sides until you get to the end basically. And that seats it evenly, and it's about 7 foot-pounds. And most importantly, you're tightening all the bolts equally so it sits down even. We'll reinstall the PCV. Now here's the really tough one. We're gonna have to balance it, play a little bit of operation without hitting anything, and I can actually hold it a little bit there. Right, there we go, right into that hole. And go ahead and snug them up and be real gentle with these. The timing belt cover. While everything's reconnected, now's a good time to clean everything up a bit. Put the coil packs back in. Lastly, reinstall the harness. Put the 2 screws back in that hold the wiring harness in place. Reinstall the graphics, then we'll turn it on and test for leaks. With everything back together, it runs great. There's no leaks, and I'm really glad to have this old crusty rubber out of there, and it's a really pretty easy job to do.